black sea bass and scup. Dan is going to summarize some of what we heard, I think, at public hearings, and we've gotten a fair amount of written comments come in. And as always, there's mixed opinions, particularly on the black sea bass fishery rule. It really comes down to when we start the season, the abundance of sea bass in our waters. They're very, very easy to catch. Everybody knows that. Everybody's catching the Boston Harbor pretty easily as well. So there's no question that there's a lot of black sea bass around. I'm not questioning that. I wish the quota was more than double what it is. We're working on that through other approaches. Dan, are you ready to pick it up?
Thanks, Paul. It's obvious that the scup and the black sea bass fisheries are related, but if we take them one at a time, we take the easy one, which is the scup fishery, because it's a liberalization. But I guess I still ask the Commission to think of these fisheries in their totality, because they are very related. One deal tends to catch both species, etc. Because the fish do both arrive in our southern waters by the end of April, early May. For the same reasons, they summer here, they spawn here, and they do provide commercial and recreational fishing opportunities. So the scup is much easier. It's a liberalization of our rules, not in reaction to an increased quota, but in reaction to the fact that we haven't taken the full amount of our quota in the past few years. And so even though the quota is being dropped in 2013 from 2012, we only took 60% of our state's allocation. And when I say it's allocation, it's the summer period. There are 3 periods in the federal interstate plans. There's a winter 1, a winter 2 on either end, and then in the middle is a summer fishery that we receive a portion of the catch through the United States Fisheries Commission. So we are proposing to amend, liberalize our state rules to take advantage of unused quota that has been occurring in the past few years. And so there's really 5 things that are going on here, and that's on page 3, where we seek to allow April landings to count against the winter 1 period. The federal winter 1 period is January through April, and what we're suggesting is if vessels are landing scup during the late April period when they first arrive in our state waters, it would be appropriate to count those against the federal winter 1 quota. That's obvious. And so we would do that. The second is to liberalize the May fishery for hook and line and fish ponds from 400 to 800 pounds, as well as going from 3 days to 5 days per week. And we're thinking of this especially in light of the limited sea bass opportunities that people have either in the current rules or in the proposed rules. Either way, there is a surplus of scup, and we'd like to take advantage of that. But the next thing is we are creating a new June fishery. In the past, we haven't had a June fishery at all for commercial purposes, and so we're putting aside. We're creating a new fishery with a 400-pound trip limit and 3 days per week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then the last is we are liberalizing the summer fishery from 800 to 1,500 pounds, and that would be July until the quota is closed for the hook and line and hot fishing boats. We're proposing keeping the mobile gear trip limit static, although in the memo the director pledges if we do have a lot of unused fish to look into the potential of a late summer scup fishery. Right now we have a minimum mesh size for auto trawls that precludes most scup from being caught. They do escape the 6.5-inch mesh that all the drivers are using. And so it is something we could look into. The problem is we don't want to be looking at a mixed trawl fishery like we used to have back in the 70s and 80s when we had a 3.5-inch mesh and boats fishing all summer for a mix of things, squid, scup, sea sea bass and food. I think the things we've evolved to over the last 3 decades has been kind of, I guess, a more responsible partitioning of these fishery species. We don't want to undermine that because we don't have much discard in any of the fisheries that we're dealing with right now. And so that's one of our fears. So that's the SCUP proposal in its entirety. And at the hearing, there was very good support for this. Almost all the folks who did speak positively about this proposal. So if you'd like to...
do these one at a time? That's what I think. Yeah.
Would you like to do one at a time? Oh, you need SCUP or? Oh, the SCUP.
Each.
Or,
Not each.
no, but
No,
the
this SCUP.
SCUP
Species.
species. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so this is the division's recommendation, Dan?
Yes.
All right, the division has put forth a recommendation, so we'll need a motion to either accept or reject. Chuck?
I will make the motion to accept as presented.
Seconded by Reg. Discussion? None? I will take unanimous.
All right, the second species, and obviously the quota is very small relative to the growing abundance of fish. And I just want to provide the Commission with a little bit of history of how we manage this fish, or how we attempted to manage this quota. We used to routinely set aside fish for the spring period and then have a second fishing period in August. And we tried to manage that based on quota monitoring. And if you know anything about the quota monitoring techniques, is you use last week's data in this week, and we use that to project next week. So we use deal reports every week. So the challenge with the sea bass quota monitoring is that when fish arrive in May, there's almost a doubling per week of the catch rates. And so it reminded me of the analogy before, it's like trying to catch a rising balloon before it gets out of reach. And it's very challenging because the fish do arrive as does the effort. So fishermen gear up, fish arrive, and it's not like other species that might be here for a while when the commercial fishery opens, and you can sort of reliably predict, or you can the fishing rates last week are going to be similar to those this week, and they're going to be similar to those next week. This isn't the case in sea bass. Sea bass, it's almost an exponential rate of increase. So what we did a few years ago is we said, okay, we can't manage this through quota monitoring in order to reserve some quantity of fish for the August period. So we're going to go to a new thing where we're just going to set the days and set the trips, the trip limits in the month of May based on past year's landings, and hope that this leaves us some fish for August. And that worked 1 year. The second year last year with the abundance of fish, it didn't work. It didn't work means we had just 10 open fishing days for the entire quota of just 225,000 pounds. And the fishery quotas for the year. In fact, even with the 10 open fishing days, I think we probably should have closed a day or two earlier. But you know, our quota monitoring game, they're not getting daily reports, they're getting weekly reports. And so it's an extremely difficult fishery for us to manage. So we almost feel as if you have a somewhat liberal, even with a constrictive set of rules for the month of May, it's very difficult for us to manage this very minor quota at a time of great abundance. And so we've been discussing, debating, pondering how to do this. And the analogy that I'll use is striped bass. The striped bass quota was established decades ago, and when it was decided to be open, it wasn't open in late April when fish arrived, or early May. It was opened at a time based on a commission and Director Coates' decision back then to provide the quota at a time when there was fish distributed throughout the state, and the catch rates were less than the catch rates that you might get early in the season In other words, if striped bass were managed like sea bass, we would probably close our fishery in the first week of June. And so we're looking at black sea bass because that's what we're experiencing, a quota that is opening up as soon as they arrive. And despite the fact that we've lowered these trip limits to levels that I think is as low as you can without it not making any more sense. You know, an 80-pound trip limit for a commercial vessel is pretty close to the recreational limit when you get a couple of guys on the boat. So we've done everything we can to lower the trip limit in order to extend the season, and we failed. We did take an action last year to try to squeeze the number of permits, but there's still about 1,700 black sea bass endorsements in our system. Now, that isn't 1,700 people chasing black sea bass. That just means there's 1,700 people who have a commercial permit with a sea bass endorsement. So a rank and file commercial lobsterman who might be fishing in Boston might have black sea bass as an endorsement. Probably doesn't catch much, but he's in the population. But we've also seen a rapid growth in the number of individual permits, and hook and line permits, and then working closely with the Office of Law Enforcement. You know, every spring we get these horror stories of multiple persons on a boat or multiple trips in a day. In other words, these fish is just so abundant. We only have so many environmental police. It's very difficult to make rules that will level the playing field and not invite people to cheat and take advantage of this great abundance. So it is our proposal to move these fish, move the quota away from this time in May when these fish are extraordinarily abundant, up against the beach, highly catchable, when boats are making multiple trips, when fish is being attributed to multiple permits in the same family, in some cases on the same boat, in other cases no boat. And you can't prove a lot of this. It's anecdotal, or it's sort of implied in the landing statistics. But unless you have an army of environmental police to control this, you're not going to bring this under control as long as you're managing the way we're managing it. So we averaged about 20,000 pounds a day during this open fishery. So last year, with 220,000 pounds, you'd expect to get 10, 11 days. There was a little bit of fish landed in April, so you can see how we ended the fishery as quickly as we did. Even now, with the quota increase, you're looking at 280,000 pounds. That's 14 days of fishing at the 80,000 pound rate. I'm sorry, at the 20,000 pound rate per day, which is probably at the lowest trip limits that we can dream up. 200 pounds for hooks. I'm sorry, 200 pounds for potters and 80 pounds for hooks. So it is our proposal to move this fish, Fishery, to later in the year when, much like striped bass, when the fish are less concentrated. In some ways, they're less available. But at a time when we think that the fishery could be managed or enforced better, and also when the markets might take advantage of some of these fish. I know the fish are all shipped to New York. You can see it all in the testimony. But we've had communications with some dealers, some restaurant owners, that if there was fish available during the later time of the year, they would be marketed locally. Right now, they're not. We know from our statistics that the price for sea bass during the summer last year, even though our fishery was closed, there was some fish landed under research set-asides, it was almost $5 a pound. And we've seen this historically, even when the years, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when we did have 2 seasons, we did have some fish left over for the summer. The summer price was 50% higher than the spring price. So, you go from $3 to $4.50 later in the year. So we think that has merit. We think that there's some advantages to that. And if we don't make any change, I believe you're looking at officers running around in circles. You're looking at another 13-day season, maybe. You've got a lot of loopholes in permitting that should be addressed, that are difficult to address. And that's our challenge. So we can see from the testimony there's plenty of people who are taking advantage of the spring fishery, maybe are unable to go locate the fish further from shore or later in the summer. So it could be a de facto allocation, but I remind the commission that we did entertain a proposal years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, to have a summer fishery, and we decided, no, we're going to try to put fish aside for both seasons, and we continue to fail to do that. We can't control the spring fishery enough to make fish available for the summer. Or if there is some fish available in summer, it's going to be of minimal quantities. So that's our proposal. There's a lot in this memo. One thing I didn't point out is there is a very interesting pair of graphs. David found these and he put these together. We do have a trend in increasing spawning stock biomass, which doesn't appear to be resulting in increasing recruitment. And the thinking is that maybe there is still too much pre-spawn harvest going on. David can speak to some of the odd and unique behaviors of male sea bass creating herons, and I don't know how the romance of the courtship is affected when some of these fish are extracted, but that is an issue. So anyway, so if you adopt our proposal, we'd like to see the fishery begin in August, and it's been labeled as the first Tuesday of August, and we'd like to increase the trip limits to 150 and 300 pounds. We'd like to set aside some fish for the weirs, a small amount of 10,000 pounds, because the weirs do come down in June, and they would have no other access to the fish. And the 3 days a week instead of the current 4. There's 4 days now? 5. Instead of 5. So we did, based on the comments we heard, we did scale back our original proposals that we took to hearing with lower trip limits and fewer days. As far as the minimum size goes, it's not as easy as any of the other species, because when you get up to 14 and 15 inches, you are most likely catching exclusively males. And again, with some of the unique fishing behaviors, we're being advised against that from the experts throughout the East Coast who study black sea bass behavior, but that's not a good way to manage the fishery either. So, that's all I have.
David, do you have anything to say?
Only that the Mid-Atlantic Council, the Scientific and Statistical Committee of the Mid-Atlantic Council did recently increase the quota for black sea bass. The reason why they did that was they finally acknowledged that we do have a rebuilt resource, way over the target, the biomass target. We're not overfishing, we're not overfished. So they actually adopted, the scientists actually adopted the logic that the Division of Marine Fisheries offered up 2 years ago to have a higher quota. Our logic was disregarded at that time, but now they've embraced it. So, very good. The quota has gone up 1 million pounds, so that's divided between the commercial and recreational fishery. But the scientists of the Mid-Atlantic Council and the technical committee members as well of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission still focus on the fact that black sea bass have very unique spawning behavior, very unique life history characteristics. Much of it's not well understood. They're basically breed fish. A large number of females will transform into males depending upon the abundance of males in the population. They do have harems. So because of that uncertainty, we've been told that it's very likely that for the next 3 years at least, and I suspect into the distant future, we'll be looking at quotas like we have right now, 280,000 pounds for Massachusetts commercial. That's likely not going to change much at all unless for some reason the scientists become more aware of the science behind black sea bass reproduction and life history, and they got to change of heart. I don't think that's going to be the case. This is a very difficult species to research. So we're looking at pretty much what we have right now as a continuation. It will be continued into the future, despite the fact that black sea bass are everywhere, expanding their range in Boston Harbor, as Dan said. The data provided to us, the division and you, by our bottom 12 survey has indicated that we do expect and we do find large amounts of black sea bass in our waters. Perhaps last year, because the temperatures were at an all-time high, spring temperatures all-time high, so the fish arrived early, we think primarily because of those increased temperatures. And we just have had a very large amount of black sea bass in our waters. Not as much to the south, which again lends some credibility to the fact that there's been a climatic shift, a temperature regime shift. More fish are up here than farther to the south. So we're perhaps taking advantage of abundance that is here because the fish have abandoned the regions, not completely, but certainly have abandoned many of the southern regions. That's about all I can add to what Dan has provided. He's summarized what's in the memo, all the background, reason for our recommendation. He summarized that very well.
Thanks, Dale. Right?
I just have a question about point of order. What we discussed this at commission meetings in the past, we discussed status quo, July 1st opening, August 1st opening, September 1st opening. I reread the pack 3 times, and I saw a lot of the sentiment was, well, you're not going to give us the spring fishery, at least hold it off until September 1st. I never saw an August 6th opening. And the other thing I'd like to remind this commission of, there's going to be a commercial fishery on the North Shore this year. Cape Cod Bay, Boston Harbor. So I read Paul's rationale about opening it up on August 6th because he wants to make sure the quota's caught. I don't think commercial segment is going to have a problem catching the fish, especially when you get inclusive of all the permit holders up in Boston Harbor, up around Gloucester, up that way. I had fishermen from Maine call me last year saying, "Geez, Brad, I caught this funny-looking tropical fish here. It's black and blue." Go online and Google black sea bass, and sure enough, they call me back and say, "Yeah, that's what it was." So I just like the commission to be aware of that this is no longer just Martha's Vineyard, Buzzards Bay, Nantucket Sound, that it is going to occur in Boston Harbor and points north. And I read your rationale, Paul. You know, you were afraid they weren't going to catch it, so you wanted to open it on August 6th. But that date was never discussed in public hearings. And I don't know if they're going to have a problem catching this poultry quota. You know, if you open it the 1st of September, including Boston Harbor and all those endorsements up that way, I think they'll catch this allocation readily. So it's just a point of order.
Well,
Yeah, we did implement a limited entry program last year with Fishery, which is going to continue this year. So, it would be interesting to see if harvest takes place on the North Shore, but if someone didn't have that commercial endorsement in prior years, then they won't get it this year. That's one thing. As far as we've done the best we could. I think Dan's done a good job talking about all the issues that face us with this small quota. And this is less than 300,000 pounds of fish. The recommendations for the August 6th start. The commission doesn't support that. And we're looking at status quo. If we leave here today, we're looking at status quo. So if the division doesn't support this recommendation, what I'd be willing to do is hear your discussion, what your rationale might be for an alternative. Maybe we can take a break during the meeting, give me a chance to talk to staff whether or not I'll change my recommendation. But at this point, it's either the recommendation I recommended, which if it fails, then we go to status quo. I think you know what the that'll result in very short fishery. We had that several years. Conditions that don't seem to satisfy anyone.
John?
I had a question on the presentation and not what was being proposed for regulation. Dan, can you further elaborate on, you indicated there was some high occurrences of non-compliance related to recreational fishing and assignment of commercial landings in excess of, how does that relate to permit landings, or how are they curbing the process? I was just kind of concerned, I'm not concerned, I was confused on how they get around the system.
Well,
Need a permit to land.
there's two separate issues. One is multiple commercial permits creating a problem for us, attributable to one person, one family, one boat. It's all kinds of means to everybody, because the privilege is so low that they're so easy to catch that, you know, they retain other permits. The second issue is a little more delicate, and I think we're going to talk about that later in the meeting under other business. But what we discovered is there's a belief among certain charter boat operators that if they hold a commercial permit, that they can fish with their clients on the commercial limit, and then sell the fish to them under the theory that they are the general public and this is a retail boat. So we're seeing some really, I guess, predictably creative things given this highly abundant fish and people just trying to, make some economy out of it. But so there's separate issues. As far as the multiple permits go, I mean, we've even had our quota monitoring folks call up some I'll call them second-tier dealers. Not dealers who have the brick and mortar, the places you can walk into, 7 days a week, but some of these other dealers who are amazingly reporting multiple trips on the same vessel, with different permits. And we're telling them, this isn't right. In fact, somebody told me somebody told me he just went to a doctor, and the doctor said that he and their buddies all have real commercial permits, so they can each take a limit. And so I know it's an education challenge, but the fact is that this May fishery is just so hot, it's really difficult to get your hands on it with the limited enforcement that we have. And so it's really separate issues. Multiple permits that are being used to circumvent the low trip limits, and then a new revolution, which is certain charter boat owners have some new theories about how they can circumvent the recreational back limits.
I know everything that Dan said was true, but I know a lot of the people who went at the meeting in Mass Maritime. At the meeting in Mass Maritime, 8 people spoke that they definitely wanted a spring fishery, and only a couple of people spoke that they wanted a fishery to start in another time of year. I think there was 2 for July, there was 1 for August, and I think there was 2 for September. And everybody else had asked for to have a small spring fishery. And I know that's when they're most abundant, and that seems to be when all these problems seem to be occurring, but it seems to be what the public wants is a spring fishery. Most of the fishermen that I talk to, they want a spring fishery. Even if it's only 50 pounds of fish for anliners and 100 pounds of fish or potters, they still want a spring fishery. And you must have noticed that at the meeting, Dan, you were at the meeting, and, guys got up and spoke there. The other guys were so adamant about having a fishery start in July or August or September, you would have had more people speak for it. That's what I'm telling you. I don't think I can support. I don't think I can support this. It's just it's not flexible enough to me. I know there's not much quota, but something should be done in the springtime to help these guys because they have nothing else to fish for except stuff. That's it. And I think that that's what keeps the scup quota down. Is a lot of guys don't go potting stuff because if the price is down around 35 or 40 cents, they can't make any money potting stuff. So what happens is if they don't get a few sea bass to at least pay for the fuel, then they don't catch the stuff. A lot of guys don't go stuff fishing. That's what I
Bill?
A couple of questions here. First of all, on the weir fishery, the 10,000-pound aggregate, what do you mean? Is that total among all the weir fishermen or per weir fisherman? Total. That's a total. Okay. I also read your comment about the reason for the August opening could have been something to do with the price for the fishermen because it's still in season, whereas September, pretty much the season's over. And I almost wanted to further Ed to see if price-wise between August and September, is it a better price if it's open in August than if it opens in September? Another question I had to do with the 100 pounds that are taken in the winter. Does that amount to any significant amount of the quota being taken before we even get into the spring? Is it not a big deal?
Just a few thousand pounds. I'll turn the story on that.
That's right, only a few thousand pounds, but what happened last year was that 100 pounds in April turned into several people landing fishing in shore, so.
So under 5,000 pounds is taken during
Okay.
the real winter fishery. Problem was, in the old days, April wasn't a sea bass month, and with the warming temperatures, April's becoming a sea bass month. So there were people going out for their 100 in April, and that added to the use.
Okay, one more question. On the mobile gear, the proposal here is whenever it does open at 150 pounds, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, is that the way it's been? Or I mean, trying to tell a mobile gear fisherman that he can fish for this stuff Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if he's out all week fishing for whatever he can catch, how do you handle that?
Good question, Bill. It's under the 2012 rules, the mobile gear boats could retain sea bass on 10 days in May, and then they couldn't retain them at all in June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So at least this gives a few days to keep some fish. So it's not ideal. Yeah. Most of the summertime catch of sea bass by the fluke draggers is pretty nominal. And, it's maybe a few fish. We've never seen any big quantities of sea bass being caught. But again, with the abundance changing, who knows? But they tend not to catch more than maybe a half a box.
And in the spring fisheries that we've had, what was the poundage, I can't remember, for the pots and the hook and line in the spring fishery? 200
for the potters, 80 for basically everybody else.
Okay, and that took the quota in the past.
And with those rules, we landed about 20,000 pounds per day for open fishing day.
And is there any benefit in having a spring fishery but lowering that number? It might not be worth their while, but at the same time, it might be spring fishery. I'm just throwing that one out. What?
lower the number of days. That could be.
All right, something along that line, if it would, I feel badly that in the past couple of years, I think the fall fisheries, I call it summer fisheries, didn't get going because the quota was taken. Although I think it was a year or two ago, there was a tiny bit of quota where you had to fish. That was about it. So I didn't know if the possibility of having a lower number in the spring, maybe as Ed just mentioned, gauge would provide a spring fishery and still leave something. I know we've tried this over the years, trying to constrain that enough that the other guys get a shot at it, and it never seemed to work instead. So I was just exploring that possibility.
You want to wait, Randy, until David answers that, and then you're next?
That's a loaded question. Go ahead, David. No, I'm kidding.
I just wanted to remind the commission that we do have a number of emails that were copied and provided to you, and there are emails from individuals expressing their support for a movement of the season, moving it from the spring to the summer. For example, Eric Rodriguez, there's John Colley, and there are others. And of course, there are emails supporting the continuation of some opportunity in the springtime, and I understand why they want that opportunity. They made it very clear when they came to the public hearing. Those few individuals who did come and speak to the issue said they wanted to get a jump start on the season, wanted to make a little money. That's fine enough. We understand that. Those are very compelling reasons, very understandable positions by those fishermen. If I was them, I would want that too, that opportunity. Nevertheless, the division had to look beyond that and look at the bigger picture being defined by the important objectives that we're trying to achieve, and those are described once again in that background section of Paul's email to you, where we say that for the greater good, so to speak, how to better manage this fishery in a way that makes sense in terms of efficiency, sound fisheries management practices. We are suggesting to you that our recommendations will redistribute, provide greater access provide greater access to black sea bass for a larger number of individuals, reduce intense fishing effort on pre-spawning and spawning fish, extend the length of the fishing season, and reduce non-compliance with commercial fishery regulations. Those are very important reasons why we make this recommendation to you. We have given serious thought to to the comments made by those who want status quo. But we don't believe that status quo or even cutting down the number of fishing days makes sense, because these are more important objectives we feel need to be achieved.
Randy?
Thank you, Chair. With the understanding that if the motion to accept is seconded, it then leads into comment.
There's been no motion.
But there is comment after a motion is made.
Absolutely.
So I would motion that we accept the proposal that the division put forward that is shown.
All right, Randy made the motion to support the division's recommendation. Second, Ray? Thank you. David, I had a question for you. I think your two graphs here are pretty telling, especially the second one with the end of the year. If we were to adopt this, the commission was to adopt this, do you think you'd see a difference in that trend in a year? Would you pick up something next year if this spawning was?
Yeah, because there's no way that we can sure what would happen and make that very clear in the memo. The data that we have from our resource assessment project are very suggestive. And we know that when there's, well, it's common sense that when you take many of the pre-spawners out, the large females, the large adults, that they'll be less available on the ground to spawn. Therefore, the young of the year might not be as abundant later on in the season. And we do pick up the young of the year in a voluntary survey. Therefore, after the survey is completed this fall 2013, we'll be able to take a look at the young of the year index and see where it lies relative to
pick it up this
abundance of black
fall,
sea bass in
right?
our waters. What's that?
You would pick that up this
We
fall?
pick it up in the fall.
And then again in the spring, or you wouldn't?
We pick it up in the fall, the young of the year abundance, and then of course in the spring we pick up the abundance of.
Because it's interesting that the two curves are almost, identical, one going up and one going down.
Right, and again, we focused on the 2012, 2010 points in particular, and the trend line for the abundance of the young of the year. Black sea bass being so abundant in our water this past spring, one would have expected a tremendous abundance at the end of the year. Now, obviously, there are many factors affecting the success, survival of young of the year, not just the number of adults. But still, the data are suggestive, and it just feeds into our argument that protection of pre-spawning fish, this unique spawning behavior, is warranted. And as you say, Mr. Chairman, fall bottom troll survey information. It would be very interesting for us to look at to see if it reveals a reversal of this downward trend of young year abundance.
Yeah?
These surveys are not. The reason why you catch so many sea bass in the spring is because a lot of them aren't unstructured yet. And the reason why you don't catch them in the fall is they are unstructured. If you do a bottom trawl survey, you're trying to stay away from structure, and that's how the bottom trawl survey is done. They don't go to structure. Now, everybody knows if you're a pot fisherman, you put sea bass pots out, you put them on a smooth bottom, because sea bass like structure, so you catch them in a smooth bottom. In the fall, they all go to the hard bottom. They all go up on a rock bottom. And the fall trawl survey is not a good way to test the sea bass because they're all on the hard bottom, and they're not going to trawl on the hard bottom. So these surveys done by trawl to me, are just a waste of time.
David?
Yes, indeed. They do go to the hard bottom, but clearly they're also on bottom that doesn't have that relief, flat bottom, sand bottom. Just take note of the fact that young of the year do appear in our fall survey in large numbers. It's not as if they're not going to show up because they're on hard bottom. They do show up. We do survey in those areas where young of the year can be abundant, and that's evident from the database.
Any further discussion? The motion was made by
Just to illustrate my support for this proposal. And so, Ed, one of the things you mentioned is that the public comment was people spoke up and said we really want a spring fishery.
It's not, this is what, let me explain something, Ray, before you finish. This is not a personal thing by me.
Sure.
This is fishermen that I know that are asking me to support a spring survey. If there were a lot of fishermen that asked me to support summer or fall, I would be speaking more to summer or fall. But I think I'm speaking more facts here and more for the constituents that are talking to me and the people that are involved in fishing. It's not a personal thing.
No, I totally understand.
And bottom trawl surveys to me are, the way we do them is ridiculous. The only reason why we catch fish is it's an accident. All right? That's our bottom trawl survey. It's an accident. Look at the Tautog survey for the last 20 years. They never catch it. Why? Because they're not fishermen and they have the wrong gear and they go to the wrong places. And that's why they don't catch fish. Oh my God. The whole survey system has to be changed. And I know you're dealing with Porter and I listen to what the rest of you, what you have to say, but I'm just telling you what the fishermen want. And that's what we're here for, is to help the fishermen.
Right. And so the thought that came to my mind when you brought that up is Dan's description of how the system is being played so elegantly by a number of players in that field. You're agreeing with that statement, that you know these games are being played. And so what comes to my mind is, if I'm playing the system down there and it's working out well for me and there's very little threat of enforcement, then hell yeah, I want to keep that fishery in the spring because I know I can't play the system in the fall the way I can in the spring. And so even though I know it's not in the best interest of the fishery, the fact that it's in the best interest of me personally trumps my concern for the fishery. So I take that kind of a little grain of salt, thinking about who might be supporting that. I know there's legit people that want the spring fishery, and don't discount that at all. But the other things that come to mind is, for the guys that fish codfish, they took a hit by us closing spawning areas to fishing pressure. So the guys up north that are fishing the gillnets and the longliners, they took a hit because we as a commission made it impossible for them to fish on these spawning aggregations. It seems hypocritical to say, but we're going to let that fishing pressure on spawning populations happen down south. That doesn't seem particularly right to me. And this notion of value of the fishery. It's an argument that may appear in discussions on other fisheries as we go through this, but if the value of the fish and the fishery improves under a different model, then that's something that is meaningful to me. And if you're getting a higher price for fish starting in August versus May, I place value on a fish being worth more then. If that becomes important to me. It seems, Ray, I don't know this person, but it seems like if you start in mid-August versus September, you give the local markets a chance to benefit from the availability of fish while the local economies are still hot. I don't know that. I would suspect to me that the fish becomes valuable in August because there's still a lot of tourists in those areas. Or if you wait till September, you're starting to ramp down, and consequently value might go down. I don't know that, but those three issues, that the value would increase, that other fisheries have taken a hit by closing spawning, and keeping that grain of salt, aesthetically speaking, I feel strongly that we should accept this as proposed.
Of course you do.
Greg?
Yeah, I second this motion, and I would hope, Dan, that we keep a close eye on it this year, and we come up with some good results. I think that's what we're all looking for, both this commission and the fishermen involved in this fishery, as opposed to all the funny show we've seen in past years with that spring fishery. I didn't even realize it was a fishery, a lake fishery, years ago. A number of fishermen down my way have expressed concern that they want to see that fall fishery. So, as it stands now, as this motion stands now, they'll be fishing 3 days a week starting the 6th of August, right?
Yes, Ray, if I could just address one of your concerns about the opening date. Given the days of the week, if we were to have an August 1st opening, it would be an August 4th opening because of the way this year the days of the week fall. So it would be just one different day.
Just a short statement. I agree with you on what goes on in the spring. As far as spawning is concerned, I don't think that's a concern. Because in the cod fishery, it might be because we've noticed a decline in the cod fishery everywhere. But the sea bass fishery, even though there's such intense fishing in the spring and all this stuff going on, the sea bass just keep multiplying and multiplying. So we're not even putting a dent in the sea bass. And to be honest with you, the August start, the value of the fish would be more in August than it would be in September or in May or June. Because it's not only here, but it's the Jersey Shore and places like that.
Joe?
I agree with Ed. There's a lot of fishermen that would like the spring as the time for the fishery. I've been an advocate for that in other discussions we've had. But at this point, we're dividing up crumbs, and I would support this only because I know that if we put a solid effort into splitting it between the spring and the fall, you're talking about a 4-day season in the spring, 4.5-day season to even split it up. And I'm going to say that I've finally given in to the fact that the spring, until we get some realistic quota for sea bass, the spring season is a tough one. So.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, Greg?
These endorsements have already gone out, Paul.
Yes.
Well, maybe a follow-up letter for people who have Black Sea Bass endorsements, because we've had to sit in commission meetings without the public. We've had to listen to Story read through 2-hour dissertations on non-compliance. Maybe the DMF should follow it up expressly with people who have Black Sea Bass endorsements about the non-compliance issue, because that seems to be one of the major problems with this fishery.
There's a passage in the memo where I reiterate what I said in the public hearing.
Right, I saw that.
Compliance will be taken very seriously. I'm requesting that if law enforcement issues any violations, that we deal with that administratively, that they be brought to attention, and anything that stands up, any violation stands up to our finding of fact, through the administrative procedure, I'll deal with those points.
All right, any other comments? All right, the motion has been made to support the division's recommendation for the commercial sea bass was made by Randy, seconded by Ray. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed?